Hello everyone, I'm Jake, your friendly ant keeper and biologist. Welcome to the My Living World's Ants channel. So today, we're answering a big question. Do ants have brains? What is the driving force behind an ant colony? And how are these fascinating creatures different from us? First, we will take a look at how ants function as a unit and as individuals. Ants are known for their teamwork and hive-like minds, but what determines whether these ants can think individually, and how they communicate to get things done? The biggest question of all is who is in charge of the colony? Who gives the orders? The queen may be able to lay down pheromones to let her workers know who is in charge, but really, she is just a breeding machine, and although workers do all the heavy work, they are also not in charge. The complexity of an ant's behaviour is not exactly in that individual, but more by its surrounding complex environment. A singular worker ant almost seems incapable of functioning without its colony, and of course its queen. But this isn't necessarily true. Ants communicate using chemical cues, but they also have a vast amount of other cues which are controlled by different parts of their brain. This is an ant head close up. And this is what lies underneath, the brain of an ant. Much like the human brain, there are different components that have different functions, but there are some major physical differences. Neurons, or nerve cells, are the fundamental units of the brain and the nervous system. Essentially, they send electrical signals or sensory information through the body and brain. The human brain contains roughly 86 billion neurons, whereas an ant brain only has around 250,000. But for the size of an ant, this is vastly impressive, and ants are considered to be one of the most intelligent insects in the world. These are optical lobes, which lay just underneath the eye. They are responsible for light sensitivity, and in more advanced ant species, vision for hunting. This is the mushroom body. This part of the ant's brain is very important and acts as an integration centre for processing both chemical and visual information, as well as environmental feedback. These are the antennal lobes. These are directly connected to the antenna of the ants. Essentially, this is the nose of the ant, and it's their first processing centre for odours. These are the major parts making up an ant's brain, but here is what it really looks like. The above components can be seen slightly outlined, but as research methods for observing ants' brains changes, in the future we may be able to investigate more parts of the ant's brain. The brain size in different castes of ants also vastly varies, with major and soldiers having small brains to compensate for the large proportion of jaw muscles filling out the ant's head. With the average size minor and media worker, they are much larger in comparison, filling up the majority of the ant's head. This can be explained by the soldiers and majors having limiting behavioural demands compared to the workers and queens. In some cases, the size of an ant's brain can even change. A particular species of ant called Harpignathos saltator, sometimes known as the jumping ant, can actually change the size of their brain. In this video, these are the sister species Harpignathos venator. For most species of ants, there are one or several queens in a colony. Only queens and male drones are fertile ants. If the queen dies out, the workers are usually deemed helpless. But for jumping ants, this is not the case, as these ants are a gamete species. This means that the colony is composed of workers which can reproduce. Once the queen of the colony has died, the workers will go through a jousting tournament with their antenna to assert dominance. This event can take up to 40 days for the ants to determine a new queen. After this happens, the dominant worker will then start to shrink their brain by up to 25%, and the size of her ovaries will start to increase. What is even more extraordinary about this event is that it is reversible. the worker would be able to reduce its ovary size and regrow its brain. Now, imagine an ant the size of a human. How big would the ant's brain be? For humans, about 2% of our body mass makes up our brain, but for ants, it can greatly vary on the species. Some ranging from 1 to 5% body mass. And as mentioned earlier, major and soldier ants tend to have much smaller brains, usually composed of 0.5 to 1% of their body mass. But generally speaking, for the average ant species, their brain size wouldn't be much different from ours. If we were to scale up an ant's brain to the size of a human, we can give a representation of difference in neurons. As mentioned earlier, the rough estimate of neurons in the human brain is 86 billion, and in ants it ranges between 100,000 to 250,000 neurons. But, for the size of an ant's brain, scaled up to the size of a human's, it would contain roughly 2 to 4 trillion neurons. What goes on inside an ant's brain is greatly dependent on environmental cues. Princess ants, known as female alates, are greatly dependent on environmental and chemical cues for their nuptial flights and mating. When given two options, young virgin queen ants will almost always choose a dark region over a light one. After heavy rainstorms and showers, followed by dry days of high temperatures, the ants process the environmental chemistry to know exactly the right time for these nuptial flights. The chemistry of an ant's brain changes and their optical lobes are suddenly stimulated to be attracted to light for their mating flights. Then, the newly mated queens drop down and prepare to break their wings off and start digging to make their first nest. Once again, their behaviour changes to be stimulated by dark environments. This change in stimulation to light seems to only happen for a matter of hours before it reverts back. This strange behaviour can be explained by the optical lobes in an ant's brain. This seems to be stimulated by sexual pheromones. In preparation for nuptial flights, the ant's optical lobes enlarge, and after mating when the queens land on the ground, these lobes seem to shrink. This causes the mated queen to once again be attracted to darkness. The brain of an ant also allows them to be highly social insects, be it aggression, docility, or curiosity. The certain part of an ant's brain which covers sociality is the mushroom body. There was a study done to determine how an ant would react to a fellow dead worker ant. In this study, one colony had a single worker, only having interacted with the queen, and another had many workers. When observing what would happen when a dead worker was placed, the two different colonies showed very different results. The single worker colony showed no interest in the dead worker, whereas the colony with many workers showed great curiosity and immediately moved the body of the dead worker ant. Furthermore, the actual size of the mushroom body for the multiple worker colony was much larger, showing a higher level of sociality. With the lone worker, their mushroom body did not grow at all. After much research, the individual capability of a worker ant can be seen to be much greater than we think, and it also gives rise to the idea that within the superorganism of an ant colony, there are thousands of individual brains inside with minds of their own. In this video, we only skimmed the surface of an ant's brain, but I really hope that you enjoyed this video and found it informative. Don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe if you haven't already. See you in my next video.